So welcome to our first panel for this morning's session, entitled Collaboration, JVs, and Partnerships. How can the industry work together better to resource tomorrow? And joining me on this panel are, closest to me, I'll start with you, Monica Ospina, who is a sustainability expert and founder of O-Trade, a sustainability firm based out of Canada. Welcome, thank you. And to her left, we have Peter Graham, who is the Infrastructure, Energy, and Materials Industry Solution Experience Director at Dassault Systèmes. Bienvenue, welcome, Peter.
Thank you.
And next to Peter, we have Farzi Yusufali, who is the co-founder of Stratum AI, a machine learning algorithm company which we'll explore a bit more. It sounds quite cryptic, my description, but more to come. Welcome, Farzi.
Thanks so much.
And last but not least, Kathryn Hadler, who is the director at the European Space Resources Innovation Center in Luxembourg. So welcome.
Thank you very much.
Now, going straight into it, we have space, we have algorithms, we have hardware, we have software, and we have a social scientist, we have people. Yeah, I think this will make a very interesting panel, and I'd love to start off with the question, does the industry collaborate and partner enough? And I guess starting with you, Farzi, Stratum AI involves deep learning algorithms for mine operators. Can you talk us through a bit of the disruption that you're doing at Stratum AI? And I say disruption because what you're doing is a new way of unearthing or understanding what's below ground. So can you talk us through that a bit and talk us through how your partnerships shape what your organization does?
Yeah, I'll answer in two ways. One is both just the technology perspective and how it affects the mines directly, and what, in reality, what that looks like when working with various clients or parties that are looking to understand what's in the ground better. So very simply, the status quo has been that geologists use their understanding of the ground and a form of interpolation or these types of algorithms that essentially allow you to figure out what's in the ground, and then you use that information to figure out how you're going to mine out the asset, what your returns are going to be, what potential issues you may come across as well throughout the mine life. But that all hinges on the fact that you need to understand what's in the ground from a unit volume basis. Given some 10 by 10 by 10 meter block, can I know with a certain amount of certainty that this is the amount of value I'm going to get? So as you can imagine, with 3 geologists given the same data, you're going to get 5 different answers. There's a significant amount of interpretation involved. So what we've done as a company and what we've chosen to do is to take all of that, throw a lot of these assumptions and the way things have been done for the past 40, 50 years and thrown that out the window. We've come up with a new algorithm that, given the same data, will give you a much better understanding of what's in the ground, and it has been proven out to be closer to the truth. So in practice, that means that the mine economics change because now you can actually plan for what's coming.
And can we then maybe use this in future when it comes to space exploration? Do we have, and actually Farzi, that's a question for you. Do you envision this being applied? I'm being quite cheeky by throwing this out there.
My assertion is that the reason why gold, let's take gold as an example. Gold exists in the ground, dispersed in a certain way. There's a pattern attached to that. There's a reason why you find gold in point XYZ versus another place within the same rock. If you're able to extract those patterns and anticipate where that gold is going to be, there's no reason why the rock underneath the ground on Earth should be any different from the rock running around, flying around in space. The patterns still exist the same way. It's the same basic physics.
So perhaps a potential partnership, Kathryn.
Yeah, the space resources sector is always looking for partnerships. So just to go back to your issue of collaboration in space, traditionally space has been very nationalistic. So we have the NASA missions, ESA, everybody sticks to their own country. And actually we're on the cusp of a huge change in the space sector. Tomorrow now, there was supposed to be a launch today, but it will be tomorrow, and it's a SpaceX rocket carrying an iSpace lander that will go to the moon, land March, April next year, and a rover from the UAE. So we start to see more collaboration in the space sector itself, and space resources, the use of space resources to enable space exploration is something that we are very interested in ESRIC. So when we talk about space resources, I think most people think I'm talking about going and getting an asteroid and bringing that material back to Earth, and actually that's not the case. What I'm interested in is going into space and using the resources that we find there to enable humans maybe to spend longer in space and travel onwards to Mars. That is a significant challenge. So we've not only got to understand how we can use the materials there, what they are, how we can extract usable things from them, but we also then need to build, we need to provide resupply, we need to support human life in what is a hostile environment. And that is too big a challenge for one company, one research institute, one space agency. It will, one country. It takes an entire collaborative effort to make that a reality.
So who are some of your partners? Like, what do your partnerships look like?
Well, ESRIC itself, so European Space Resources Innovation Centre, is 2 years old. So it's relatively new. It is an innovation centre in a research and technology organisation in Luxembourg, in Luxembourg Institute of Science and Technology, and we have partnerships, or we are supported by the Luxembourg Space Agency and the European Space Agency. So we're relatively new and we're building up our capability, but really it was identified, the reason we exist is it was identified as a need for ESA to have a dedicated centre in Europe focused on space resources. Our current partnerships are with, the typical aerospace giants, Airbus, for example, but also with startups. And what we find in this field is that there's a really dynamic and very interesting field of startups. So we can work with those to develop concepts, we can support those businesses as well. And actually, Luxembourg sounds improbable, but Luxembourg is very much behind space resources, and it is one of the leading countries in the field of space resources. As a small country, they are very nimble and they are very willing to support initiatives. So that's why we're there.
Interesting. So Luxembourg, the new frontier for startups and space.
Space resources startup.
Space resources
Absolutely.
Startup. Amazing. One thing that struck me is that space has always been nationalized. So there's been a protectiveness around it, and then also lots of secrets around space and knowledge and research. And the same would go for software. I don't know if you see where I'm going with this. You do. So looking at a software company like Dassault, Peter, where your software and your IPs are quite protected, how do we talk to a software company about collaboration, especially when it comes to developing this IP and maybe protecting it a bit?
Okay. I'll try and sort of bring it back to earth a little bit. Yeah. I think the challenges that the world faces are ever more complex, and the response has to be more ambitious. And the only way that that response is going to take place is if we bring various parts together and collaborate, right? I mean, how do you colonize space? No one country is going to do that on its own, or even one organization. So what we're seeing is that the world is demanding more and more collaboration and to overcome some very ambitious challenges. For example, the most recent one that I think we faced is the pandemic, and that needed a lot of collaboration to very quickly bring out new vaccines, new responses to the pandemic, and the way that we've approached that, and we see that there is a big appetite for that at Dassault, is our firm belief that virtual worlds play a big part in doing something in the real world, right? So, for example, before you go to the moon or wherever to exploit resources there, you really should test that in a virtual world, and that's what we did. For example, in the COVID-19 situation, we collaborated with a number of organisations to make sure that a vaccine response was provided in record time. And we're seeing that also being applied with mining companies to try and overcome challenges, global warming, the quest for sustainability. It's something that is not going to be driven by one entity itself. There's always been collaboration in the industry, particularly at a personal level, peer-to-peer collaboration. I think that is reducing a little bit. I think there is perhaps a drain of expertise, which is where potentially AI, I think, can help to fill the gap. We're all collaborating here today under the same roof, exchanging ideas and sharing information and so on, and looking for new ways of doing things. There is plenty of collaboration at different levels, but I think the challenges are getting greater. So we're trying to facilitate that by providing software platforms and that will host that collaboration and meet those challenges.
And I guess part of that, of establishing the right software platform, is also understanding who the users are and whether that will translate to the applicability by people, right? Mm-hmm. And it was important to have Monica's voice here as the person who is you're on the ground. Peter, you said we'll take it from space back to Earth, but let's take it really back to Earth, to the ground. You collaborate with mining companies and civil societies and help to translate some of these, metaverse concepts and quite abstract concepts to the people on the ground. How important is it to, one, be able to translate it, and what is it that your company, O-Trade, is doing to really garner the right collaborations and partnerships?
Well, I'm very happy the way it goes from a space to the boots on the ground where the mosquito bites exist. So my experience is all around mosquito bites. That's how I measure my years in this. And I will say that there are a couple of things that we have to separate here. Number one, I think that the whole real factual idea of collaboration with partners that are different than mining or different than geology is fairly a new trend in the industry. And the second part is how we are integrating knowledge is the second part. So let's start from the first one around is new. Is new is not because people don't want to. It's new because the nature of the industry places us in remote areas. and in some cases in countries that are difficult jurisdictions, and at the same time in some areas that even governments, they don't know there are human settlements there until mining kind of, wow, it's royalties. Now I'm interested. So that put us like a space, like in some mines, in some regions in the world, so far remote that it's like a space, it's so far away. So the idea of collaboration in that case from boots on the ground, it starts from our immediate stakeholders, who are we impacting? And that could flourish to working with local municipalities, with indigenous peoples, with women groups, with schools. It sounds very simple, but the concept of collaboration is the idea that we can create value. And I will take this as a critical point, because in the industry, we tend to call ourselves, and we are under the umbrella of extractive industry. But when you just go on the semantics and how the semantics translate to the engagement process, extractive you take and go. When you talk about we are an industry that creates value, I'm back. And when you talk about collaboration, we want a partner that comes back. We want the spaceship to come back.
Yes.
So it's the same as when we go to the field. So that's what I'm saying that is new in the industry sometimes, just even moving from extractive to creating value point. So in terms of going just out of that, so now let's go to the headquarters. That's much easier to start working around collaboration with civil society, because they are located in areas where you can just have these dialogues. Today, we are meeting and making lots of friends who probably are not in the same city as you are, but connectivity allows us to exchange ideas, as Peter was highlighting. And that exchange of ideas, that piece is the beginning. But I will say that in the industry, it's also that piece of fear. And we have been learning to be fearful of criticism, because we have been attacked. We are just a hole on the ground. And we accept it. But we are not arguing. I think that probably is the nature of geologists. They just go for the rocks. I had one colleague once that says, I love my rocks because they don't complain. You go to your communities, Monica. So, and it's just that fact that I think that we start collaboration means for the industry to shift the mentality to say, we create value. Probably if we just put it in reverse at other industries, but we create value. We create value by bringing those minerals live in a form of technology, medical devices, buildings, spaceships.
Yeah.
So that's how we create value. We are the first chain in the supply chain, and that is the first value creation.
So it sounds as though we will be having a partnership with indigenous communities and space and Farzi. And I see Farzi. I feel like you would like to respond to this.
I think there's something very critical here, and I've seen this from the other side, on the tech side. So, as being a deep tech company for all intents and purposes, where the technology itself is quite difficult to actually, execute and produce, the knowledge about the mining industry is so woefully misunderstood by the rest of the world that I'll relay a really funny story. I remember getting my first round of investment from my private investors. And I had to explain to these investors that other things besides coal comes out of the ground. I had to bring that information or bring it back to their own worlds, saying 70% of the material in your phone came out of the ground, so that they can respect the industry. So on that front, it's up to us as being part of the industry to make it very clear what it means to be, what kind of value you're producing and what they use every single day. That's the one half. The other half, being part of the tech industry and working with the people on the ground, is to meet the people where they are. It doesn't make sense to, talk about lofty goals or talk about technology you want to produce unless they can understand it and seeing it being used every day. That might mean that you actually downgrade the amount of technology that you can deploy on a remote site because it's just not accessible.
Yeah.
Right? So let's say I'm deploying my machine learning technology as an example, but maybe the output is a CSV file. It's an Excel spreadsheet because that's what's accessible. And that's what's light on the data side, so they actually can use it on a daily basis, given the fact that they don't have connectivity, at least not consistent connectivity. So there's a two-sided conversation that needs to be happening, but it's up to us, either on the tech side or on the mining side, to meet people where they are.
And I think that's a very important point. We need to meet people where they are. I think with tech, it often runs away from everyone else, which is, from the industry side, it's important that we're going at such a rate. But when it comes to connectivity, how do we bring it back? Monica.
I can't resist.
Go for it.
To add on
Don't
this,
resist.
I think that going back to that value creation, and I will love that all of us go home saying, yes, we create value, is that in the past we were disconnected. I mean, when I hear the stories, it's just fascinating. All of these guys, seriously, you try to find a needle and you can't, but these guys find mineral deposits in mountains. So it's just extraordinary, incredible. But we were not connected. And technology today is getting us closer and closer. And sometimes people are afraid of that, and obviously social media comes and explodes like dynamite. But it is the understanding, and I think that that's the piece in terms of collaboration, connecting this to what the purpose of the session is that connectivity and that ability. You find towns right now that even mining companies in social investment, the ones that understand very well what is the impact, they are highlighting in terms of social investment the access to internet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not only for the benefit of the mine. Some cases they just have it open in the plaza in the little town so people can connect. So that connectivity it just basically what allows us to bring spreadsheets or whatever form of knowledge or ideas exchange. Right. So I think that this is the beauty of that evolution. We are remote, but technology is making us closer. So how now we can use that as a highway to help us.
And I think there's a similar thing happening, I'm an old academic, with academia and bringing research and what we're talking about at the academic level to the miners and to the people in the communities. And I'd like to bring in Kathryn and Peter into this discussion as well, in terms of how are we partnering with academics? Are we partnering enough? But then how are we able to translate the academic speech to tangible outputs and outcomes? And maybe I will start with Kathryn.
Yeah, of course. So before I moved into the field of space resources, I was in mineral processing. I'm a flotation person by background. And I was working at Imperial College until, just down the road, obviously, until April this year. So through my flotation research, I developed an optimization technique that can optimize your cells by changing air. The peak air recovery concept improves the recovery of your minerals. Really, really simple in concept, but very difficult to implement. And we spent many years in collaboration with industrial partners testing this. We went around the world, we tested it, demonstrated the value, but implementing it is really challenging because we don't have good control on many of our flotation systems, and implementing optimization on top of poorly controlled flotation cells is never going to work. And that's one of the problems that we have, is that there's good ideas out there, there's good research out there, but that final implementation is really difficult because of other issues that we have with our plants. And that is in one way what drove me into the space resources field, was the feeling that actually I can do flotation research for the rest of my life and nothing will probably ever get implemented because there's that hurdle to getting things on the plant and operating and getting the buy-in from from plants. And so the move into space resources was driven by looking for new ideas, new concepts. What else is out there? What's a bigger question that we can be asking? So I think that's one aspect that we always have faced with academia is getting the research translated into implementation. And still today, I'm now in space resources, but I think it's still the same challenge.
Yeah. And Peter?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there are increasing examples of academia and industry collaborating, but I think academia and industry works in slightly different ways. I think academia is more focused on expertise and furthering knowledge, whereas industry is more focused on achieving objectives. And to try and bring those two together in the past has been a bit challenging, but today there is an increasing amount of collaboration because, again, the world recognizes nobody's going to solve problems on their own. So you've got innovation programs, for example, like from the European Commission, Horizon 2020, now Horizon Europe, which has brought a lot of owner-operator companies and academia together to solve problems that affect us all. They come, interestingly enough, under the heading of societal challenges. I think the key to the successful collaboration is, first of all, sharing the responsibilities. When you look at the successful programs that have been executed, it's about sharing everything. The project management, the financial monitoring, the IP. Importantly, I think it's important that everybody is invested in the technology and takes ownership, literally. And that seems to sort of alleviate some of the misunderstandings that can occur. So the amount of collaboration across different parts of academia and industry is increasing. Industry is even encouraging it. You see a lot of the major mining companies are launching their own research programs, inviting it's open source investigation, if you like, in launching competitions to solve particular problems, and that encouraging new players in the industry, startups and innovators to get involved. So I think it's looking very good. I think part of that is due to changing attitudes. We all think differently in the workplace as well as consumers outside, and that demands different ways of tackling old problems.
And yes, Kathryn.
I just want to touch on a point that Peter made, which I thought was fascinating, about the different objectives or the objective-driven for industry and knowledge-driven in academia. One of the other big challenges that we have is timescales. We operate over very different timescales. So, the academic world, we will, if you have a PhD, that's 4 years. And then if we're looking at a big research program, really, you need 5 years to be able to make any kind of progress. But the industry is much more short-term impact focused. And this mismatch in timescales, I think, leads to a lot of problems of long-term development.
Absolutely, and I think understanding that everyone's working on very different timescales. I know that Monica will probably say yes, the communities are working on a very immediate timescale, whereas the academics, 7 years later, and we're still working on that research piece, right? And still hopefully getting funding. Hopefully, yes. Now, Peter, you mentioned the collaboration with the EU Commission, for example, and Kathryn, I know that the Luxembourg government is a big player in the Innovation Center. Who should be driving these collaborations? collaborations? Should it be government, Monica, or should it be the multilaterals and the international governmental agencies? Should it be governments? Or should we look towards the mining companies to really chart out what these collaborations and partnerships should really look like? Monica?
I will take the first part. I think that when we talk about who we serve, as humble as it is, in this planet, we serve society, we serve our families, we serve our kids, we serve schools, we serve society. So, and I think that what is happening around global warming and the call for the energy transition is a global call that we serve society in terms of support, the reduction of greenhouse gases. But how can we continue to electrify, keep industries running, and people being able to work and bring food to the table? So I think that we serve society. So that should be the mandate. The mandate is from each corner of the work that we do and the industry we are associated with. What is my industry serving to, and how can we do better? And that is a new wave of collaboration for mining. Is now we see that actually is flourishing, that mining companies are in collaboration with automotive producers, or we are in collaboration with medical devices or technology around that, because goes back to the very beginning. This is how we create value. And what you were saying before, this is how my job in extracting these minerals will bring value to society. So I think that might sound a little bit philosophical, but we probably helps us to give some direction.
And who should be promoting this? So who do you think should be
All of
promoting this?
us. I think it's interesting. When I work with indigenous peoples, sometimes we tend to think that I have one indigenous leader I remember, and I always quote him because he was such a grounded. He says, people forget that we have a head that we can use out of putting feathers. And that is a call for, I want knowledge, I want innovation, I want to be part of this. So if we are going to call for communities, we need to bring the purpose of that. So these minerals will bring a purpose and create value by, and we don't have that answer dry straight. Not
Maybe
all the time.
one day. Peter, please.
Yeah, I agree. It should be society, and I think generally it is. You know, when I look back at sort of experience we've had with working on the European-funded projects, before those calls for projects are launched, you know, there is a 2-3 year process before that where the societal challenges are identified. There are working groups that are established to look at what needs fixing, how to fix it, before those calls even go out. And anybody can participate in those, you know, and be a registered expert. And the reality is that you get a very broad section of society participating in defining those objectives, whether it's academia, whether it's engineering companies, whether it's consultants, whether it's operators, you know, anybody you could think of really is involved in that. And that's how these projects come to fruition, to fix real challenges. I think the one challenge that is perhaps underestimated, and this is why we try to be involved with this, is how do you actually deliver these projects, you know, effectively? How do you make sure that collaboration is in place, that everything is properly documented, everything is correctly aligned? And that's, again, you come back to the premise of a virtual world. You know, in life there are no rehearsals, but in a virtual world you can. And give a good example of collaboration, for instance, the ITER project, which is the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor. That's the first commercially capable fusion reactor that's being built, and there are 35 countries participating in that project. Huge budget. To build something that's never been done before, and the only way that is going to work is if you've got a virtual twin all along to make sure that every step is being tested in one way or another.
And Farzi, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, I'll be a little bit
one
more
more
direct.
minute.
I'll be a little bit more direct because it's a firm belief of mine. The people who will push these collaborations are the people who will have direct economic value that they receive from those collaborations. So it really depends on the type of project you decide to undertake. But the parties that are involved, if the incentives are aligned such that economic value is being created, that is a truly sustainable collaboration that will actually be implemented over a long period of time. So let's take the social example. If being very, very specific, there's a private equity group in Alaska that is comprised of 20 tribes. They, as a mandate, invest in every single mining property in Alaska, and that value is directly taken back to their communities because it's an investment.
Yeah.
So that incentive is being aligned with the companies who actually operate those mines because, one, they're receiving funding to actually build out those mines, and then once they actually go into production, this Alaskan PE fund actually reaps the benefits of those. So that's an aligned incentive. If you're talking about technology, if the financial value is shown and proven and very strictly laid out, whether it's short-term or long-term, both collaborators will naturally align to promote it because they're going to get some economic value at the end of it.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, or the truth of the matter is money makes the world go round, but if it's very clear that there's economic value to be had, whether it's on a more social scale or community-based scale, or something as large as an international collaboration to bring a certain technology to life. If the financial foundation has been laid out such that the value created from this collaboration is very, very well understood, it's naturally going to happen.
Wonderful. And I see Andrew looming behind me. So, Kathryn, you will have the last word. 30 seconds we can spare.
Because I have to go and talk in the other room in about 10 minutes as a small advert. If you
Good
would like
way to
more
promote.
space resources with pictures, it's in the other room in about 10 minutes. For me, funding. If the funding promotes collaboration, then that's what happens.
Yeah.
That's the long and short of it for me.
It goes back to Farzi's
Money.
point.
Yeah,
as well.
money,
It's
absolutely.
always money.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So society and money is what we need to consider when we make these collaborations. Thank you to our panelists. Please join me in giving them a round of applause.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.